Nairobi, over 4 million residents of Nairobi. There are quite some challenges, and we have seen, looking at the rivers that we have, Nairobi River, just a couple of meters from where we are, the situation is not quite good, but we'll be talking about that. Daktari, looking at what the President talked about during the Committee of Africa Heads of State and on climate change, which he happens to be the head in Addis Ababa this weekend. And of course, beginning from September the 4th to the 6th, the Africa Summit on Climate Change will be held right here in the capital, Nairobi, and we'll be talking about that as well. Daktari, looking at what the head of state, I saw him talking to, I think it was Al Jazeera, and he talked about the situation being really, really dire. We were talking about 5 million people. In his own words, we are edging towards the 6 million mark. Over 2.5 million livestock are lost, and you hail from that kind of region. And I'm quite sure the security challenge has only exacerbated the situation. There have been calls from a number of leaders from the ASO regions asking the head of state to declare it not a national emergency, but a disaster. I'd like to pick your mind on that.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much for inviting us to KBC. It is true that the phenomenon of climate change and global warming that is characterized by drought, floods, and severe heat or temperatures is a phenomenon that is real and that has affected significantly the whole world. You see countries that have all the capacity facing a challenge with wildfires, like the United States, Australia, and these other countries. Of late, it has also reached us. Was it Aberdare that we have the wildfire? Those are all the phenomena of the current crisis. Coming to the north, first and foremost, the nomadic community. All through, they have been living in the nomadic lifestyle, where they had cattle, camels, and goats, and other domestic animals. The situation with carbon emission, global carbon emission, that resulted into this global climate change and temperatures rising, has resulted into a situation that compromises the basic livelihood of the people in the nomadic areas.
All right, and I'm quite sure the situation is a little bit heavy on the ASO regions, but I'll hold your thought, because right now we need to cross over. There is at the Serena Hotel, where the Kenya National Police annual delegates are currently speaking, and Simon Chilugui, the CS for Cooperatives and MSMEs, is currently speaking. Let's first of all listen in.
Governance issues. So the leadership of the society then needs to encourage members to save and carry out aggressive marketing activities to increase its membership. I've seen other members who have been mentioned by the chair who are non-police officers, and I think you are also mentoring the defense circle, something which is good. As we grow, we get children, and they branch out, and they stand on their own. The pride of a father and mother is to see their children grow and be strong and successful. And I want to register my gratitude for that mentorship you are giving the defense service. The trajectory you are pursuing portends a bigger things to come in future. And I believe this growth is due to proper leadership and deterred resilience, focus, and consistent determination to meeting the very objectives the society was created for. Dear delegates, We are living in a digital era and embrace information and technological transformation. You have made enormous strides in technological transformation, and I'm informed that your digital platform constitutes over 30% of your business. No branch has a higher return than your digital platform. That is sufficient evidence on the role of technology is playing. And I think even further to underline that, the power of technology. The delivery of 19 billion to 18 million Kenyans happened in 2 months through digital platforms. And I wonder how many days would have taken to call for meetings, tunaambia cooperative officer, tuitie watu ya Embakasi, tunaenda kuwazungumzia masala suko, tunakuja hapa Westlands. It could have taken us 20 years. But through the power of technology, we have been able to mobilize and reach out to over 18 million people in 2 months. So I want to encourage you to keep on pursuing the power of technology. Let me use this forum to urge the investment in information technology and be at par with the changing business environment in doing your business. Ladies and gentlemen, the mandate of my ministry includes cooperative policy and implementation and developing standards, cooperative legislation and support services. We have undertaken appropriate interventions for the growth and development of cooperatives. Sessional paper number 4 of 2020, the National Cooperative Policy on promoting cooperatives for socio-economic transformation to enhance governance in the management of cooperatives, align Cooperatives Acts with the Constitution 2010, especially on the role of the 2 levels of government. Secondly, operationalization of the non-deposit taking business regulation 2020 that prescribed the prudential and market conduct measures for BOSA business effective. This covered non-deposit taking circles with over 100 million deposits, diaspora cooperatives, and virtual platforms. Third, the Central Liquidity Facility or the Shared Services Platform to enable SACCOs to participate in national payment system, which is in process. The fourth one is Deposit Guarantee Fund, aimed at protecting members' funds, which is ongoing. We will strive to improve the policy environment and conducive for conducting cooperative business. Ladies and gentlemen, the progressive revitalization of the sector will include a holistic approach by looking broadly at the challenges the cooperatives encountered then and now. I've had engagement with the leadership of the movement, and we had consultative meeting in Naivasha. Our discussions have centered on challenges they encounter and their commitment on resolving them over and above the government support. I've since received the report recently enumerating challenges being encountered by the sector. And I think I saw Marupe here in the room. Yes, that was the team leader, and he led a wide, robust consultation with the movement as the CEO of Cooperative Alliance. And I think we are moving in the right direction. The approach which I have adopted is to cluster the approach into cooperative subsectors. Collectively, the issues identified will be addressed in an organized manner, and implementation will be developed by each subsector. I'll be engaging them in their clusters as per their subsector needs and commitment. Bottom line is to align the bottom-up economic concept as espoused in the commitments made in the Kenya Kwanza plan. Ladies and gentlemen, the recently launched Financial Inclusion Fund, or the ASLA Fund for that matter, will address the low capitalization and limited access to affordable financing being experienced by many cooperatives. The first phase targeted those not currently attractive to the mainstream financial institutions and have in the past suffered inaccessibility to capital and exposed to exploitation by predatory moneylenders. The fund has freed them from such financial exploitation by providing them with affordable and easily accessible source of credit. The second microloan product phase will be launched at the end of this month, and as at today, 9 o'clock this morning, which is 1 hour ago, we have disbursed through this initiative 19,605,419,802. 19,605,419,802. And repayment we have received is 10,605,775,060. And the number of Kenyans opted in are 18,903,017. And the savings we have received so far in their accounts, na hii ni pesa kidogo hata kuliko hii yenu ya mabaki, ni shilingi 20, shilingi 50, shilingi 75. 977 million in 2 months has been saved by Kenyans. So wengine walikuwa wanasema 500.
That is the CS for Cooperatives, Simon Chilugui there at the Kenya National Police Deposit Taking SACCO annual delegates meeting. And I'm quite sure these are some of the figures that will be hitting headlines in terms of what he's talking about. And when it comes to the Hustler Fund, he's talking about 19 billion, which has already been disbursed. 10 billion. People have already returned 10 billion, and 18 million Kenyans are already have already registered for that fund, and 900 million has already been saved in a duration of 2 months. He's talked about his access of funds and of course loans, investment in information technology, and something else is the tech and digitization, which has been key in ensuring that the SACCO movement is so robust in the country. We'll be bringing you a later, much more updated version of that report in our subsequent bulletin. But just in case you joined us, this is KBC News Check, and we are looking at the drought situation in the country in the backdrop of the summit that was held in Addis Ababa by the Committee of Heads of Government and State, and the head of state, President William Ruto, was the chairman of that, just in preparations for what we'll be having from September the 4th to the 6th, where we'll be having the Africa Climate Conference or Summit right here in Nairobi. I have two experts who know quite a lot in terms of matters drought and some of the challenges that have been brought by that drought. And even before we look at some of the deliberations that have been made when you talk about the summit, we had the COP27 earlier on, later on last year, I think it was November 27 there in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And a number of issues were discussed there, and a number of issues also came up in terms of compensation and water fuel. We'll be looking at that as well. But before we crossed over to the Serena, where the CES was talking about, I had posed this question where some of the leaders from your region have urged the president not once, not twice, to declare drought a national disaster. Have we gotten there yet? 6 million Kenyans, 2.5 million livestock.
Correct. We have a significant effect of the current situation, the drought situation in the country, particularly in the northern region. A number of issues or events have occurred in the region. One, first and foremost, as he mentioned about the water towers, significantly that has affected the lowlands where water usually is harvested, particularly the northern region. And the major areas where the water is being, the water towers are not harvesting much, then it will be difficult for the northern people to get any water downstream there. Having said that, the drought has drastically damaged the livelihood of the northerners. One, all the livestock that have been their livelihood completely perished. I don't think if there will be any livestock from northern Kenya if this situation continues for another 1 month or so. Secondly, it has now, once it has affected the livelihood, it has affected also the population, the human population. What has happened is that now food has become scarce. They used to live on feed on their animals. They used to sell their animals and buy products, food, and now it has become very difficult to do so. And what has happened is that massive malnutrition, particularly children, earlier on started with affected by the situation, and currently adult malnutrition has been reported by experts who have conducted surveys on the same situation. And that means that the moment situation on the ground start hitting the common people, and the situation drastically reduces in terms of how they can fetch their livelihood, then the situation becomes a crisis. And that's why leaders from northern Kenya are insisting that perhaps it is time now to call a disaster the current situation and see how best we can salvage the communities living in the northern region. Secondly, with scarcity of resources, with scarcity of food, people start fighting over the little resources that have remained, including cross-border. People are crossing over to Somalia, people are crossing over to Ethiopia from Kenya. People are crossing to other counties in Eastern, Kitui and Isiolo. And the reason as why these pastoralists are coming all over these regions and crossing to these areas is because the little livestock that have remained needs fodders, they need food, and therefore they need to come to an area where they can find food, where they can find water. And in that process, the host community, where the pastoralists join to bring their animals, now causes conflict, and they fight over the resources that is only available. The other thing is that, our youth now has become very idle, in the sense that no animal to look after. Now, the northerners have now thought of their traditional way of raiding kettles, so that they're able to snatch or steal from others who have those animals. They come as far as areas closer to Nairobi, where there are animals now, so that they could raid and steal and take it back. But again, even if they steal, do they have anywhere to take it back? So there are quite a number of things that have emerged due to this current crisis. The drought crisis is real, and I tend to think the only way to go about is to declare it a disaster, so that we are able to save the lives of the people who are in the northern region by providing water, food, and nutritious complement for their children, so that they are able to cross over to the next season. And when you look at it very keenly and historically, we have lost almost 5 seasons where there was no effective rain. So the bottom line is that if 5 consecutive rainy seasons never rained well, or there was not much rain in terms of harvest that people will have made, we expect even the current one, the one which is coming, probably could be as the same as the 5 previous ones which has caused this disaster. And therefore I think it's the right time for the government to declare this as a disaster. It's the right time to appeal to international communities and well-wishers, so that we're able to save the life of the northerners, so that we don't lose a generation to the current devastating disaster.
And it's a good thing you've mentioned that, because looking at what happened in Turkana, that is on Sunday night. It's 4 days to the operation by the Kenya Defence Forces, and of course being spearheaded by the National Police Service. 4 people were murdered, just to underscore that this is something that is really pushing communities to the brink. But we'll be touching on security as well. But I would like to come to you, Bernard Francis, looking at I did a report around 3 weeks ago, in regards to water catchment areas in Trans Nzoia, where the river itself is actually drying up, and a number of factors: human encroachment, poor farming methods, trees that suck all the water, and of course exacerbated by the current drought situation. What is the situation in Nairobi? We have the Nairobi Rivers Commission, And I'm quite sure we have a number of agencies who look into, even have NEMA as well. What is the current situation in Nairobi and in big towns? Because they all rely on water pans and water catchment areas.
Within our region first is that we have a combination of urban areas and rural areas. In rural areas, those people in the rural areas, they do the best they can to take care of the environment, to take care of the waters. And actually where the water comes from is from the rural areas. Even Bagathi River comes from a very rural area. That is Gateway Spring and Ekong Spring. Then once the water leaves there, it goes down through Nairobi. So we have done the best we can as a region within our area. But when it leaves our area, many things happen on the way. And those people within the urban areas, they are the ones who pollute the water. And there should be control through the national agencies, the national government agencies like NEMA and the Ministry of Health and the others, and even the county government of Nairobi. And we have been trying our best to keep them in touch when we are doing our activities. And actually, when we are doing our activities, we included the GAO, the National Government Administrative Officers. And like yesterday, we had a meeting because at Ekong Spring, where the water comes from, that goes to Bagathi River, it has been getting little and little every day. There are 4 institutions that get water from that region, that particular spring. And they don't leave enough for the community downstream. That's a very big challenge. Then you find that most of the people who have done construction along the riparian area, they are directing the wastewater into the river. When little drops of water comes down, let's say during rainy season, they open up those sewerage systems and the water goes into the river and pollutes. The other day, like yesterday, I talked to some doctors from Mororwa Dispensary, and they were doing a survey to see the effect of the water that people are using from within our area. Now I was wondering, if the water has been polluted even from the source, what happens when it goes down through Nairobi area, where there are a lot of industries, where there is a lot of pollution, where the sewerage system is not controlled? So I think it is a high time that we as individuals, don't wait for somebody to come or the organization to come or the government to come in. As an individual, play your part. Because when you have a ground next to the water catchment area, and then you direct that waste into the water, it means you don't mind about the person downstream. And now, like people from those dry areas, like the Kaba areas, they depend on what we have done upstream. The government can bring directives, we plant 15 billion trees. But you as an individual, what can you do to make sure that there is enough water, the water is clean, and it is conducive, not only for human consumption, but also for the animals. Yeah. Like now, when the water comes from our area, it goes through the national park, and the animals there take that water, then it goes down to the Kaba area, the people living in that area consume that water. So if you have not taken your part to make sure that that water is enough, is clean, and it doesn't have those bad metals in it, then you'll feel that you have not done your part as a nation. Let's be each brother's keeper. We do what we can upstream, then when the water reaches downstream, it will be as good and it will help the community in such a way that if they use it to do irrigation, it means that even the food that will come from those regions, it will be safe. But if the foods are grown in polluted water, it means they also have effects, later healthy effects. So it's upon us to make sure that we do all we can to make sure that there is enough water and the water is conducive for consumption.
And you'll be coming in to tell us what as an association you are doing to actually help this, because at the end of the day, the little water that we have, we really need to conserve the water catchment areas that we have in the country. And Doc, looking at, maybe let's look at some of the politics that we have in terms of drought and security. I remember the head of state gave an ultimatum of around 3 days for those with illegal firearms in the ASO region and in the Rift, in Kerio Valley, to surrender them. Well, what we expect as a country is that leaders always come and talk to their people, surrender these arms, and also leaders are there to talk to people and talk about how you can live or coexist peacefully despite the limited resources that we have. We have not seen that yet, and it's quite something distressing that 4 people could be killed while we are doing the mop-up exercise. Yes, indeed, it hasn't really sunk in, but that just shows you how dire things have become, to the point that security is more or less supplementary there.
Ben, there's one thing that I think is important to note, which is what is banditry? Mm-hmm. We need to understand exactly the way banditries are structured. These are community members who are living with us, who opted to take their weapon outside to go and offend other community members, and then return back to the community. And our operation now, the current set operation by the government is so much popularized that the bandits know which steps the government are intending to take. And what happens? They'll just go and hide their weapons, come back to the community, stay there with them, and become part of the people who will be clapping for the government who are conducting the operation.
Yeah, and we have even seen some cross the border.
Exactly.
When things are back to normal, they come back and they come back. The arms.
So yeah, the bottom line is that I think something is not working out very well. This is like a guerrilla war where individuals, 2 people, 3 people, these are not militaries that are camped somewhere and you are able to attack them with other forces. Mm-hmm. These are individuals who live with us, they live in our own houses, and they tend to be very safe when they see the arm of the government coming for them. And how they play safe, they know where to hide their weapons, they don't hide it in their own houses, and then they are able to pick their weapons as soon as this operation is over. They know very well the government will not have this operation for a long period. They will definitely have it for a certain period, and during that period, definitely the situation will be calm. You will not find any killings, you will not find any people with illegal arms walking around, you will not see cattle raids. But I think something needs to be looked into in terms of how best we can address this situation. Now that it is also coupled with the current resource situation, scarcity of resources, then what happens? These young men who are raiding, who are currently disarmed, who are going to keep their own arms somewhere, will just go back and come and again start their raid. If at all there will be any animals which will be left for them to raid, because I tend to think by the time this operation is over, a number of livestock will not also be available. So I think 3 things needs to be looked into. 1, the modalities in which we would like to solve the situation of banditry and cattle rustling. Secondly, what other options do we have for this youth so that they don't idle around and this does not become an option for them to gain their livelihood?
And does it disturb you that being a leader from that region, that leaders are not coming out strongly to preach about the sharing of the meager resources? We've seen leaders from your region, they come out and talk about what the government is not doing, and that is why, perhaps that is why they've asked the government to declare it a national disaster so that resources could be harnessed into the ongoing drought. Because 5 failed seasons, and the weatherman is warning that we could be facing a 6th in some parts of the country. Are you disturbed that leaders are not coming as strongly as they should when it comes to talking about sharing all these meager resources and, more importantly, conservation of the environment?
Yeah, I think it is true that leaders are not coming out very well in terms of how best we can share these resources. However, there are some few challenges that bar the leaders not to come out very clearly. For example, in Mandera, Wajir, Marsabit, Turkana, the resources are no longer there. So the resources have narrowed towards the neighboring counties. which are slightly better than those areas which are already been hit hard by the drought. Now, if your counterparts in those counties are not willing to welcome these communities who have came here to share with them the resources, it will be very difficult for the leaders of those areas which have been affected to come out and say, you guys, you are supposed to share the resources. From which angle will they going to influence the community when there is a barrier between them and the community, and that is the leadership of that county and that area. So I think it should be as a national, well, you know, the reason as to why it should be cleared a disaster is because the national government will take control over that. The counties will have minimum role other than joining and supporting the county the national government in the response, and that way the national government can dictate how best those resources can be shared from any part of the country, so long as the resources is available in that particular county, and the people who have come there to come and search for those resources are from the neighboring county, and they are Kenyans. So I think why the leaders are insisting that this should be declared a national disaster is because they want the national government to play a bigger role than the county government, who are narrowly finding a way of protecting their own and protecting the people of their county, so that they don't also go through the same crisis during this period. Nobody knows how long the drought will take. As the weatherman already mentioned, that the sixth cycle might be experienced failing in other localities, and particularly the northern part of Kenya, where there are no now vegetation, where there are no sign of harvesting of any water or getting vegetation or vegetation for their animals. The other thing I think is because in the northern region, there's a long period of underdevelopment from previous regimes, where you find quite a number of basic things are not in place. For example, I always like telling people one thing that makes me feel bad every other time. In my own homeland, we are blessed by being at the low stream of Ethiopian highlands. And every other time Ethiopia rains, whether we get rain or not, there are big dry rivers that bring huge amount of water.
Seasonal rivers.
Seasonal rivers, which brings huge amount of waters and just passes in every settlement of our area until it goes to Indian Ocean. Why do we need to harvest water in Indian Ocean, yet the ocean does not require any water? Water is required by human beings who are living along that mainstream of seasonal rivers. So if we do a very big water harvesting strategy, where we will have big dams, it will be going to have a very successful intervention to reduce this current drastic disasters that occurs every year. And particularly before I give it to you, particularly traditionally we are known for just keeping livestock. Now livestock are not there. I think the only way that we can be salvaged as northerners is to find how best we can harvest huge amount of water, do irrigation, and we are introduced to farming, because we're able to plant trees, we're able to plant seasonal, dry weather crops that can grow in a dry locations or dry weather areas. And that way we are able to change the culture of just depending on livestock, and we are able to get other livelihood such as farming. And perhaps that could be the only way we will have, because now unless our young men go and raid areas where some livestock have remained in the country to get some startup of some few livestock, I don't think if northern Kenya will have any livestock in the next 2-3 years.
And I totally concur that this situation, unless it's clearly checked, then we will run into more problems. And it's a good thing that you've mentioned the Ethiopian springs that poured their waters down at us. And looking at Turkana counties, we are also facing the same challenges, Francis. Looking at Tana River County, the same drought, despite the fact that these are counties where large volumes of water and streams pass as well. And looking at Nairobi and what you're doing, something that I asked earlier, what exactly you were doing to do that? Because if we cannot harness what we have, it kind of becomes hard to conserve it. Because looking at, I've given a practical example of Western Kenya, where I did a story on the conservation of water catchment areas. This is something that is replicating even in your jurisdiction for the 10 years that you've worked. Kindly take us through that.
You find that we can only do much, and each one of us has to play a role. We, as a region, the region that we are taking care of, which is 144 kilometers square, has forests there. And as I mentioned, there is no water forest. There is Kibiko forest, there is Gong forest, and there is Ololwa forest. And also it touches Nairobi National Park. But we can tell and sensitize the communities that they need to take care of the forests. But you find through other ways and through other means, they enter into the forest and destroy part of it. It has been kind of a conflict when we as water resource users, and when we are taking care of a very useful resource, water resource, and then you find that there are others who are taking advantage. When we protect the areas, they see an area that they can also exploit. And there is that conflict. The other thing is that you find that there is that kind of, you love yourself more than you love others. Because when you mind that water that you are destroying at the source is a livelihood for someone downstream. When you have that in mind, you'll make sure that you don't pollute that water. You don't destroy it. And you can do the best you can to make sure that that water reaches the person downstream when it is clean and without any problem or any chemical. The other thing is that he has mentioned something very important, and which you have been encouraging people. There are a lot of floods during rainy seasons. And then you find that we don't harvest that water. And it should start from our homesteads. When we are doing construction of our homesteads, we need to make sure that we harvest the water within our setup. That water can help us to even grow food there, water the trees around there. And when we start it from our home, and we start even showing our children, our future generation, that the importance of taking care of the environment. I was lucky when I was growing up. I grew up in an administrator's home, where even a 3/4 of our homes, of our farm, is a forest. So it's something that you grow with. So even the children who are growing now, we need to encourage them to take care of the environment, because the environment that is favoring us now is because we did something yesterday. So if we do something today, like the way the president said, that we need to plant that much trees, it will help the future generation. And the other point is, if I can do my part and you do a part, and we are neighboring, then we don't have to solve the problem. It's like me taking shower and you have not. The place still keep the bad order. So let's embrace it within our community and make sure that even the countries that are neighboring us are doing something for the climate. So that, because it is not, climate is not personal. It's something that is collective. Yeah.
And back to the livestock, and there's I've seen a number of agencies there, including the World Food Program there, distributing pellets to farmers to try and salvage the little livestock that is left. 2.5 million. Well, somebody would say that a lot should have been done a little bit earlier, but we've seen that project is quite being embraced by farmers there, and we have seen that in the last couple of days we have been having the livestock offtake program, which another thing is that they're talking about should have been, this is something that should always be done a little bit earlier.
Right. I would like to first take you back slightly on how some other countries indirectly or directly with minimal resources create artificial lakes and harvest water In Brazil, I visited Brazil sometimes back, and you know, in Brazil, the environment there, the air is too dry, so you must keep it humid. And how to keep it humid is every city must have an artificial lake that, you know, moisturizes the air. And what strategies did the government use? The government used very minimal resources to develop artificial lake in every settlement area. What did they do? They identified a parcel of land within the settlement area where each and every contractor, anyone who is constructing, harvests his materials from that location. By doing so, they will continue digging the area and making it wider without actually using exchequer's money or taxpayers' money. It will be the responsibility of all constructors to make sure that they harvest their materials from the same location. And at the end of the day, 1 year or 2 years, 3 years, you will have a big water catchment area, which eventually turns into an artificial lake. And that is a strategy they used. It's like community participation. But we always wait from the government to make sure that they allocate resources to create a harvesting, water harvesting plants. And therefore, I think if the government introduces certain policies that encourages such approaches, we'll be able to go through some of these challenges and find best way of harvesting resources or water resources. Coming to your point, you know very well a number of agencies started providing fodders for the animals in salvaging the few which has remained. But what are some of the challenges that people are experiencing? These animals are not used to this kind of fodder. And quite a number of them actually die after feeding on this. Number two, they require a lot of water to digest this fodder that is being picked from here. You know, it's grown here and it's taken there and it goes there when it is too dry with minimal moisture, or it's not green, it's a dry one. And that means animals like cattle or goats will require a lot of water to make sure that they are able to digest that fodder. In the process, most of them get obstructions, intestinal obstructions, and they die. Quite a number of, I remember in my own area, Mandera West, Takaba, I find we bought some fodders from here for the community, and the moment they gave it to their cows, actually they lost almost half of their cows, and they couldn't know exactly what has killed, and they were associating it with the fodder that was brought for them.
And there's no water,
and there is no still water to give those animals. So people ended up giving animals some box, this carton box are actually essential for them now as a food. Maize is also becoming a very stable food for the cows. But camel is unique. Camel usually feeds on leaves. They don't usually feed on grasses, and grasses only occurs when the situation becomes harder, like now. And of course, with that kind of change of diet in that particular animal, then definitely you may understand that they will go through a lot of challenges as well in terms of adapting to that kind of food style, and of course again digesting, and of course the demand for water again. Too much water to drink.
That's where the offtake now should come in earnest. Exactly.
That is where the point is. Then the other thing, I think that it is too late, basically, because people have lost hope. People have seen the animals are gone. People have no food. So currently, I remember recently I was called by some of the community members saying, now we have nothing completely to feed on. The little animals have all perished. They didn't even eat. It is starved until it became carcass. Then now they want food. They don't want any fodder for their animals. That means starvation now is coming to them. And strategies will have been very good to initiate at early stages when these animals we knew we're going to face this kind of situation, and it's not the first time. This is the 5th year that we are going through the same thing. There's a time Kenya Meat Commission introduced, buyout of the animals, and then they slaughter and give it to the communities to feed on. But when does it come? It is when the animals have already become too weak, thin, and skeletons, and you can't even feed on them, because you cannot feed on an animal which is very thin. And I think one way or another we are not getting a proper strategy, and of course when that strategy can be introduced, and how best that strategy can be useful. Other than having all the time, things are just, we do the firefighting way of addressing emergencies. Or we only respond to emergencies when it hits hard and when life is lost. We rarely respond to emergencies when it is in early stages. There are early warning signs of emergencies, drought, particularly drought. And you have seen the World Food Program, the World Food Program, the UN agencies, the humanitarian organizations have clearly reported several times that it is time to respond. Let's not wait until it is too late. But now, the way Kenyans like queuing for the last minute interventions is the way we have also adapted for our emergency response. So I tend to think if much is not done with clear strategies that will have impact on a life-changing effect on the community, then it will be very difficult for us to win away from this crisis. This crisis will be there with us. With the global crisis, you hear the climate change, you hear what people are talking about. We are not part of, we contribute very less in terms of developing countries on the global warming and climate change. Yeah. But we carry the burden.
And it's a good thing you've mentioned that, because that is where exactly we are headed to. Because looking at November 27, we had the we had COP27. The day before yesterday, we have the Africa Heads Climate Summit in Addis Ababa, of which our president is the head. And we will also be having the Africa Climate Summit, which will be in September from the 4th to the 6th as a country. A lot has been said, Francis, in regards to how developed countries should provide a tidal wave of support. This is actually what Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary, said on Saturday. When we were in Egypt for the COP27, a number of people, we even had placards, we even had countries demonstrating and saying that the West is giving us a lot that shouldn't be. They are the greatest polluters and the dumpers, but unfortunately we as Africa, and more or less the Horn of Africa, we are the most affected. And we're talking about if you litter, you should pay for it. But we haven't seen tangible effort since what we've talked about. And it was not the first time when we were asking, we need more tidal wave support, just like the Secretary talked about. I'd like you to pick your mind on that.
I think it's better said than done. Because actually it is not the African countries that have done much to destroy the climate. We are doing the best. I can say out of experience where I've grown, myself personally, when we settled there back those years when we were growing, it was a desert. It was just a grassland. And through the years, we have been able to change that area. But when you go to other countries, and they are the ones who have these industries, most of the automotives that we buy, most of the goods that we import are from those countries. They have invested a lot in industrialization, but they are doing nothing to take care of the climate. And the worst thing there is that they are not committed to making sure that they help the African countries to sort out the climate issue. In Africa, we have done the best. We have taken care of our catchment area. You can see even our president has done something. And even in Africa, other countries are doing something here and there. But you find that those who have the resources, they are not committed to it. And even you saw when they went to Egypt, they did not commit to it. We just went there, sent our representatives there, but they did not commit to it. The way we are doing it locally here, and sorting out the climate issues, we are using our resources. Like now within Nairobi and within the areas that we are covering, we are using the little resources that we get from the well-wishers. We don't have enough resources. And not that the resources are not there. We are trying to make the climate better, not for us, but even for those ones who are destroying it. So it is a high time now that the African countries need to come together. They join hands and push these big brothers to make sure that they play a big role in sorting out the climate issue. Because it is not us who have destroyed it, it is them.
Well said, Francis, that we are trying to conserve the environment, not only for us, for even those who are polluting. Yes, you are indeed watching KBC News Check. We are taking a quick break, but when we come back, we will be looking at some of the deliberations that have been made in all these meetings. But what are we seeing? Are we seeing what we are deliberating on? We had the COP27, we also had the Addis Ababa, but these things are not happening. Why is that? What more can we do as an individual as well as a country? We'll be back after these short messages.
Enjoy a selection of the best. Regina Ray and Tingazi.
Bado hujamwambia unamlike. Umerealize hujamwachilia mkono kutoka nikuje hapa.
Love blossoms in Mexico with the trio sisters in Las Bandidas.
I beg you, please don't go.
I want you to be the happiest man in the world with a woman who appreciates and respects you.
An array of music rave.
Make me lie when I don't want to.
Blues.
You are my everything.
Two local gems. And we sit to chat with the Thiambo.
You know, I can't even tell whether you're looking at me, seeing me. With the Louis Vuitton.
Classic comedy.
Makono tu.
Mashabiki.
Say that
again. Enjoy the Divas programming this February only on KBC Channel 1. Kenya's watching.
No, I don't think you're ready for that one yet.
What happened to not hogging the ball?
Yes, you could hog. I just think you're not ready yet.
Aki baba mwani nikikupata huku. Nikikupata huku wewe, yani unibia mbao yangu, ukamkukunywa. Hiki kibaba ni kera gani? Hiki kibaba wacha nikushike wewe.
Abuda, kuna noma nini?
Labda tuambie.
Si raha tuna noma. Ara kujitoa tuko najitoa.
So you said you're showing me evidence. I want to see it for myself. Plus the little boys, Kwani, what are they going to do? Ziggy! Ziggy, please, guys, please stop. Please say yes, someone help us. Ziggy!
Why don't you tell him what I came here for? Tell him.
Stop it. That's enough.
Go ahead. Why don't you tell him? Ask her what happened,
I'm not interested. This whole thing's over.
Just get out of my house. I don't want to see you, simple as that. And it's better if we forget about what happened between us.
What's going on between you and Amparo?
Yes, I accept.
What? Yes to marrying me?
Yes.
And also why? Why did you do this to me? I loved you. Why did this have to happen to me?
So you have a girl now, young man? Is she someone I know?
Welcome back to News Check, and thanks so much for joining us. We are looking at the climate situation in the country and the drought that is persisting in the Horn of Africa and some of the remedies. There have been meetings after meetings, summits after summit to discuss how we can better this, but we are not seeing boots on the ground. We are not seeing those fruits as yet, and especially being the African countries who bear the biggest brunt of climate change, pollution, and all that, even starvation. We are looking at 6 million Kenyans in the country who are staring at starvation. The government said it's going to be looking at that, and even in the supplementary budget, they talked about additional money. These are some of the events that we are following up on. There are public petitions committee meeting at Parliament. We'll also be having a MOU signing between Kenya and Morocco. That will be at the office of the Deputy President. Senate Finance Budget Committee is meeting at the County Hall, and the National Assembly Funds Account Committee meeting at the Continental House. Why I've mentioned this is because the Senate and the National Assembly will also be keen in adjustment for the budget, and especially when it comes to matters drought and drought mitigation. We'll also be looking at how counties as well are looking at the current situation and water collection in the country, which has been talked about day in, day out, with even the head of state talking about 100 dams in the country. Could this be the magic key that opens up all these doors? Well, allow me to reintroduce my panel of experts. We have Francis Kamau, who is an environmentalist and also the Secretary General of Ngong Hills Mbagadi Water Resource Users Association. And also we have Dr. Isaac Hassan, who is a public policy analyst. He is also a leader and also a doctor. Thank you, gentlemen, for continuing with us and also for your insight. Francis, before we look at some of the deliberations that we've had day in, day out in summits from one point to the other, from one corner of the countries to another, there's something that we were talking about earlier on when we went for a short break, and you said maybe this could be there could be a silver lining at the end of all this, if at all we incorporate a group that we do not quite really emphasize on, our children. There's something we're talking about, the Greening Schools program. Because if we inculcate the culture of conservation in our kids, it's going to be good. A practical example is during the World Cup last year in Qatar. I remember we saw the Japanese fans collecting all the trash everybody had left. This is something that we have seen not only once. In Japan, they really have some things they have inculcated in their kids. And this conservation effort could be one of the magic wands. Francis.
Thank you so much, Joe. What I may say is that when you are growing up, the values that instilled in you will affect you all your life. If you go in an area that is violent, you'll tend to have some kind of disrespect to even the other community members. Myself, I have grown in an area that is environmentally conscious. And I had mentioned earlier, my father's had 14 acres. 3/4 of it is a forest. Because of growing in such an environment, it has instilled in me a very important virtue, taking care of the environment. And I remember when we were growing up, the rivers had water. Now it's just a riverbed, a dry riverbed. So with that in mind, I think it's the high time that we start training our children with the virtues of taking care of the environment. Last year, with the support from well-wishers, we launched Greening Schools program. Greening Schools program. And the Greening Schools programs is where we involve the children.
Is it a government project to begin with?
Or no, it was sponsored by a bank. It was sponsored by a bank. And one thing is that we are working for the community, we are representing the community. And when we initiate that project, we are initiating so that it can help the community. And when we start that in a grassroots, at a grassroots level, you'll find that even others will copy the same. You'll find that it is good. There is also another initiative that we started where we involve the communities. If you have excess piece of land, we can distribute trees to such communities, and then they can plant and take care of those seedlings in their farms. Not necessarily in public places, but even those land owners who have enough parcels of land. We have started involving them in the project so that the greening issue is not just about the institutions alone. We need to make sure that as the children grow, they grow with that virtue of taking care of the trees. And the other thing is that we were encouraging people, and also we asked the government on the same to make sure that it appreciates what people are doing. We are doing a lot as environmentalists, and even young children, you find that they are involved in such a thing, but there is no appreciation and there is no commitment. If you remember last year when I came to this studio, there is a document I came up with called Green Certificate. Green Certificate is a document we had launched in 2021 December at Gong Hills. A blessing from our DCC, our area DCC, and we launched it there. What we meant by the Green Certificate is that the way we have the good conduct document, we need to make sure that people commit themselves to the behavior, not only because it is going to play a negative role when they will be looking or they will be seeking for a job somewhere, but because it is a virtue that is very important to them. They also mind about the environment. So if they are requested to bring their credentials, the certificates, the good conduct, they also bring a good conduct for the environment. And that was the point. And I'm thankful to the government because it had that. And the other day I heard the CS talk about it. We appreciate that because it's something that we had initiated in Gong, launched it at local level and also the location level and divisional level. So it's very good that the KBC gave us a chance last year and we mentioned about it. And now
the government is taking action.
It's a policy,
We are grateful we could change lives. And what Francis is talking about is something quite practical. If at all, if we're going to be talking about climate change, we cannot forget to talk about environment conservation. And inculcating this in our kids, a very practical example, in as much as I wouldn't want to use this example, but this is what exactly is happening. Let's look at Turkana, the Kerio Valley. We've seen teenagers, very young boys, holding guns and shooting guns. And these are the same people who, if we inculcate anything, good or bad, they will absorb it like a thirsty sponge. So I kind of tend to think that if at all this is what we will be inculcating. I remember even the president did gazette that during events, his CSs will be planting trees just to underscore the environmental conservation that we are likely to be seeing, and some of the efforts, whether they bear fruit now or a little bit later, is something that we are waiting to see. I would like to pick your mind on that.
Right. I would like to start from a different perspective and then come to that. First and foremost, as you hear about climate change, it is developed countries that have contributed largely. And the people who are now carrying the cross, or people who are suffering, are developing countries. But from childhood, even today, we inspire to be like one of the developed countries. But as a country, when you look at developed countries and you say we want civilization and we want everything that civilization can come with, the effect is that We already saw civilization in other countries and development, and without even that development coming to us, or even the civilization, we are already facing the effect. So is it something to inspire as a Kenyan? Do we look at that from the perspective of, do we need actually this civilization, or do we want to live our normal life and find a better way that is different from that civilization, but be able to do the same thing that civilized people do, but never do the same way they do it? Simply because, for example, we are blessed with a very beautiful land. For example, in Kenya, we have Chalbi Desert, a land which has no vegetation. It's a plain land, is huge, almost 500 kilometers. Empty. It has a lot of resources. One, we can harvest the sun, and the green energy can be harvested from there. We currently harvest electricity from Ethiopia and Uganda, and yet we have a green energy that we can invest at once and for all, and we finish with all those green energy that people are looking for. Will be an example of this country of ours. But when we desire to have the same thing that other countries who have already contributed largely to climate change have it, and we want to have them in our country, I don't understand how best we are able to cope up with it, because without them in our country, we are suffering. If those development or those carbon emissions machineries come into the country, where I know each and every day we are desiring to become civilized like those countries, I don't know whether we will be able to live in this country. We'll be frozen, or we will be fried, depending on which side the climate change will take us. Because it's not just only heat. It also changes the weather pattern, where people will going to have strange weather. We have never seen ice in our country. We may find seasons where we will have 0, -10 degrees, and that will be a shocker for all of us in a country where normal life was very easy to live in, and we have people even in the streets, and we can sleep outside because our environment is very favoring, and we have been blessed by God by giving us a very good land that is can accommodate every weather and every person. So that is one. The other thing is conservation is one of the critical things. But as I earlier mentioned, I would like to concentrate much on the northern region, which is hit largely, because it is now these other regions in the country that is becoming semi-arid, but the northern region has now been declared as a desert, because there are no vegetations, there are sand dunes, and we have sand dunes that are already now forming everywhere, dust are there. So all the features of desert is classically seen in northern region. So is it possible that we want to look at tree plantation? Yes, it is something that greatly needs to be done. But how to do that is different from how the rest of the country will approach it. The country has first of all, there's a lot of soil erosion in our area, and therefore the soil itself cannot yield anything much. So we will require manure or fertilizers for those soils, for any vegetations to grow on. Secondly, we will require water. We will require windbreakers, so that if there are no vegetations to break the wind for the nurseries, then they will not also last. The heat is too much, so they need a lot of water so that they are able to sustain their growth naturally, because if there will be no much water, then it will be very difficult for any vegetations to grow in my homeland. Where I stay in Takaba, I tried to plant some few trees in my own compound. It has become very difficult to sustain those trees, because a time comes the water is needed by animals and human beings, and therefore you will not want to put any single water on the ground, because this will going to save other lives, particularly human life. And therefore the water that we used to put for our vegetation now is not a priority. So yes, I totally agree. We totally demand that. But depending on locality, we need to approach differently, and we need to see how best that can be done. The only thing that Northern Kenya wants now, at the moment, is massive water. Water is life, and it can change a lot of things. And the moment we get permanent sources of water, and not the traditional water pans or boreholes that generate salty water and they cannot be even consumed, and they dry up during the dry season like now, and now you are supposed to do water tracking every other year and spend a lot of resources. I think the best thing is to find out how best we can harvest those water coming from Ethiopian highlands and put very huge, massive mega dams, and we are able to do irrigations, and we are able to plant those trees slowly by slowly and restore that region to its glory the way it used to be before.
And there's something that also Dr. had mentioned early on in terms of opening up regions, and I believe this is something that has been mentioned time and again, because looking at and especially when you talk about drought and insecurity, look at Kerio Valley. There are no proper roads, there are no human activities there. You find a school that is as now a lot of schools, 15 schools had closed because of the situation there. This is something that we could explore in terms of what we have. We have quite an endowment, if you ask me. Looking at in the ASO regions, wind could be harnessed for power. As he said, that instead of exporting power from Ethiopia and Uganda, we also have rivers. Look at Lake Turkana, which is quite in the middle of one of the worst hit counties. Look at county like Tana River. They have a river there, and there are dams. We have talked about dams. We've talked about conservation. This is something that we can explore to assist not only in drought situation, but also in some of the cases like he's talked about the banditry, because if at all we open up areas with agriculture, with resources, with amenities, that place is bound to grow, and we are bound to also help the climate as well.
Thank you so much. I think if each one of us can do the best they can to make sure that every water resource is cared and it is taken, it is utilized, it will be very important. One thing is that there is a tradition that we have just been mentioning some of these things, but practically we don't do. You find that in most of the places in the interior, you find there are dams there that were constructed during colonial times. Later, no other dams were constructed. And those dams that existed since colonial times are helping the community. And because it is not enough, it brings conflict. I'll give you an example of the Nairobi area that is next to Karen and Kong Springs. And Kong Springs is serving a very large region. Actually, 4 water service providers there. They benefit from that. But the water is receding. It's becoming less and less. And even not getting enough for the community downstream. It means wherever those water aquifers are, the ones that are springing from that place, it means they are not enough. So something needs to be done in those water catchment areas. Taking care of the forest, planting more trees, and controlling the number of people who can dig the wells. As water resource, we are the people who are supposed to sign those forms for anybody who is doing a well. And you find that some of them even do them at night. So such people are not mindful of the other communities, because there is a distance that one well is supposed to be
so as not to dry up,
so that it doesn't around. It doesn't dry the other springs and the other wells, but they are not following those rules. So it's upon us, even us, to be patriotic. Climate issues is about even us doing what we are supposed to do. You also find that there is this issue of people planting the trees that are not conducive or that are not friendly to the water catchment areas, and instead of protecting the water catchment area, they actually destroy it. And when you try to tell those people that whatever they are doing is not good, then it becomes an issue.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And of course, we will be touching a little bit more on this. And we have seen a lot of international agencies sponsored by some of the governments to help Africa in alleviating the drought situation in the country. But Africans argue that this is more or less to hoodwink us into not paying up for the pollution that they have done. What are some of the steps that this money and these agencies are helping us with, and where can we pick it from? And we also be looking at the county's response to this crisis that we are in. We're taking a quick break. We'll be right back.
KBC Channel 1, we put people at the heart of events with our captivating weekly news features. Every day, we are breaking new grounds with informative, entertaining, and inspiring human interest stories. On Mondays, 9 p.m., we have The Cabinets. Tuesday, 9 p.m., we get inside the barracks for military tales. We delve in the world of cinemas and theater each Wednesday night. For the young and industrious, make a date with us every Thursday at 9 p.m. Fridays are dedicated for my culture. On Saturdays, we go back in time for history in perspective. And on Sundays, we get to know the process of how things are done and made. KBC Channel 1 News features a whole lot of wonderful viewing experience.
Charlene, does your father know what you're doing? Does your date know the truth? And Jenny, does she know?
Jenny!
Stop calling me that.
Why can't I call you by your name?
Because I'm not Jenny. Can you pretend that we don't know each other?
What did you say? I didn't hear you.
At my workplace, there's a girl like you. Oh, actually, she is like you when you were young. So much about her makes me confused.
Like a girl from the ghetto, hear my retro. Stepping at them dancing the clocks. When the rest of them a beat them stiletto.
Dirty heart can't sweep with proof. Good and never. They are like the trees we can't bloom. Good and never. Under the pressure, yeah, under the pressure, under the pressure.
Welcome back. You're watching News Check, and today we have dedicated this show to focus on climate change and the drought situation in the country. Just a few days after we had the summit, the 36th Africa summit in Addis Ababa. Some of these things that we always talk about in summits, in conferences, Africa want boots on the ground. They want action to be done, or they need something to be done and action taken, and especially to those who have made our life a little bit harder. Unfortunately, there are the brothers from the West and from the East who are the heaviest polluters. And allow me to bring in my panel of experts. I want us to look at the northern region, the Asol counties, and more specific, let's go to Mandera West, where you hail from. You've worked with communities there, you've worked with people directly. I'm talking about this because I've realized that we are having more or less the same issues when we talk about, if we go to Mandera West right now, if we go to Turkana South, if we go to the Kerio Valley, if we go to Pokot, if we go to Samburu, more or less the issues are the same. And unfortunately, the ones who bear the worst brand is the women and children. We're talking about over 1 million women and children who are very, very malnourished. And looking at the issues that are associated with this climate change, including security, it's all those counties in the northern side. They have never been opened up, so to speak. Even if we look at the schools, the infrastructure there, we will pick out that these places a little bit look like they have been forgotten.
I think I'll pick it from the word you said, they have been forgotten. Not a little bit, they have been forgotten. Why do we say that? To start with, I think we have commercialized projects or interventions without prioritization. You will find, I'll want to start with issues of commercialization in reference to projects in Northern Region. One, you will find CDF is given to members of parliament to address issues of education and security. You'll find the county government has similar resources to address issues of education. You'll have national government addressing issues of education. The challenge is that do we need to have all those different arms of the government addressing the same thing? Why I'm asking that question is because we lose prioritization, and each and every person will want to do his own project, regardless of whether that project will have any impact or any effect on the community. Why I'm saying that is that now, currently, in Mandera West, there are a number of classrooms built in every village. Resources have been utilized over the last 15 years from the time CDF has been introduced. In the main settlement areas, we don't have a robust standard school in the main, sub-county headquarters. But we'll keep on erecting villages, putting up classrooms there, with no children, learning with no learners, and with no teachers. That way means is misprioritization of resources. And that way we will not get anywhere to Northern Region, because for matters of education, Northern Kenya requires a holistic approach in terms of what kind of education infrastructure we put in place that conforms to the pastoralist lifestyle. I remember sometimes back during the late President Moi, he introduced the nomadic schools. And these nomadic schools were meant purposely for pastoralists who are moving to bring in their children, to bring their children in so that they don't have to move with their parents following livestock, so they were able to land there. That now is no longer there. Instead of establishing a modern school in major settlements with proper security and all other things, and children are able to learn and they get food to eat in the same schools, like school feeding program, consolidating all those resources and ensuring that we have a quality infrastructure that can change the life of many in that locality, we will end up building empty skeleton structures in every village. That is one. So that is one area that we need to address. Secondly, all these years, now 50 years almost, infrastructure has not been there. If northern Kenya is open to the rest of the country, tarmacs are put in place everywhere, we will be able to open up. First and foremost, northerners are entrepreneurs. The pastoralists are people who are naturally business oriented. They want to sell their animals, buy some other products, and then move on that way. So business oriented community requires infrastructure, and they want access to markets. So I think opening up northern Kenya, putting up structures, roads, tarmac roads, will also reduce banditry, because the level at which vehicles will be using those roads and the speed at which vehicles will be moving will not going to subject them to be attacked by any gunman on the road, because he has to strategize when a vehicle that is ordinarily moving well.
Another thing, an open up area, we will be doing something else.
Of course, people will be doing, one, they can't access that. Two, they'll be able to do now other errands. They will be learning to do a lot of things. In Mandera West, particularly, the tarmac that was put between Nairobi and Moyale has opened some slight light towards Takaba, Mandera West, because it's around 200 kilometers that is not tarmaced for me to reach my village. Although the road is long, not shorter, that one will have passed through Garissa, Wajir and Takaba, but still, this is completely tarmac. So if that tarmac is pulled from there and taken to the next border, that is Mandera, around 400 kilometers from Moyale to Mandera, then we will have opened a lot in terms of infrastructure, in terms of business, in terms of community interaction, and of course even socialization with other communities, because they're able to access each other. The other thing that we need, that perhaps will going to change in northerners' lifestyle, is to have, as earlier mentioned, water harvesting strategy. Not the traditional water pumps, not the boreholes that we always see are not successful. We want this water coming from the highlands, heading towards the sea, be harvested. And once we harvest in a mega dams, I know that will be an artificial lakes, and we will never lose, we will never miss water. And once that is done, a lot will come with that. What is that? We are able to introduce our community to farming. We are able to do irrigations for them, and of course the government perhaps, or well-wishers, will give them some farm producers and farm products and farm tools for them to start as a start kit to start that lifestyle. They are able also to contribute to the environment in terms of planting trees and subjecting them to make sure that each family member that accesses all those resources must also plant certain number of trees, depending on what kind of policy the local government or the government at large will want to adopt. The other thing that I mentioned earlier on is that the national grid from Ethiopia just picks from Ethiopia, from Moyale, comes towards Nairobi, and definitely Moyale has got that share, and of course we cannot say that one cannot be dropped there, because it has already been dropped and it's already providing power to residents of Isiolo and up to Marsabit. If we pull that and we avoid these traditional generators that we are using to generate electricity in Mandera, Takaba, Elwak, and Wajir, and Garissa, and all these areas, of course, and Turkana, we will be able to reduce also this carbon emission, and then we will be able to also access electricity, proper electricity, not this one that breaks down every 3 months or 4 months with no proper supplies of electricity. So once those ones are put in place, I tend to think we will be changing the lifestyle and the livelihood of the community currently facing this starvation, and we may not have this continuity of having the same thing every year, where communities are subjected to drought, subsequently starvation, and then conflict occurs for resources, and then we will not be able to, if that is done, then we will not be able to waste a lot of resources in maintaining peace and order, because communities will be able to, engage themselves on a productive life where they are able to do their own mechanisms of establishing a livelihood network for themselves. So I think, and also the issue of dependence on humanitarian support.
Okay, I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, the issue of depending on humanitarians will not be there. Now, I forgot to mention, actually, in the context of resource commercialization, where I mentioned the schools and, of course, CDF and government resources, county and both national, humanitarian also have their own interventions. They program certain programs that were aimed at gearing towards supporting the communities that are affected. But generally, when you look at an established setup like the country in Kenya, where we have systems in place, I think we should be able to consolidate those resources in one basket and then prioritize it for exactly one items that can make change, complete change to the lifestyle and the livelihood of the communities that we support.
Okay.
But if each and every person look for his own resources and do bits of things that don't make significant change, then we will develop what is called dependency, which we have it. Our youth and our families are no longer intending to look for their own food. They wait for relief food, and that also compromises the continuity of the community livelihood structure that will have, in essence, moved from generation to generation.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Kamau,
Yes.
picking it from where Dorcas has mentioned, is that we are having a lot of international agencies right here in the country to help us in one way or the other. And I'm quite sure in your 10 years as an environmentalist, you have already worked with a number of both local and international organizations in terms of environmental conservation. And still on that is that counties themselves, they also have a role to play. Indeed, they do mostly depend on the national government for their share of the revenue, but at the end of the day, they are also keen on actually fighting all this. Case in point is one of the asshole county, Wajir, where I hear that the governor declared drought in the county a national disaster. I would like you to touch on those two things, on the conservation, on these partnerships and county response in terms of environmental conservation, because that is what will take us away from what we are having now.
Okay, thank you so much. We have been working together with other organizations, and actually the other day, our area DCC created a task force for environment for Kajiado North. And as I had mentioned earlier, is that we are holding a very crucial area, an environment, a friendly area that is assisting even the other areas downstream. So within that task force, we have the KWAs, we have the Kenya Forest Service, we have the GAO, the national government and the state of officers, and those organizations that do any activity concerning the environment. There are those that do waste management, those that do conservation, those that do tree planting, and even those who sensitize the communities. And there has been a gap because we find that in the past events we have not been coordinating together.
Okay, kindly hold the thought. The thought. First of all, we cross over to Kisumu, where we're having a distribution of more than 60 wheelchairs to persons with disability, and it's a partnership between West Kenya Union Conference of the SDA and Share the Love organization, an international organization as well.
Well, thank you so much, Ben Troy, back in Nairobi. We are, of course, coming to you live from the right now about the cause to help those people around you and those that are living with disabilities. And today, that is the reason we are here. Particularly, we are at the headquarters of West Kenya Conference of the SDA here in Kisumu, where, as you can see from the background here, a group, some wheelchairs that is supposed to be delivered. Beneficiaries that are already assembled here. If my colleague behind the lens can show you the people here to actually be awarded rather. Today, and if you can just look into the camera, tell us this is a very noble cause. What initiated it and who?
Jesus Christ. Jesus ministered to people according to their needs. And in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we are not just preaching.
Unfortunately, we are unable to continue with that interesting conversation with my colleague Wycliffe Okech there, but we will be getting back as soon as we have that technical hitch out of the way. But just to give you a glimpse, it's a distribution of more than 60 wheelchairs to people with disability, and which is a noble cause by our partnership between the West Kenya Union Conference of the SDA and Share the Love organization, an international organization. We'll be getting back to Wycliffe as soon as we are done with that challenge. But back to you, Kamau. And I remember we were talking about the counties and also international bodies. As you can see, that partnership and capacity building in terms of climate change mitigation.
What I was saying is that in the past, there was no coordination, such that you find every organization comes and does what it wants to do and then it leaves. So there was no coordination. But recently, there is a formation of a task force, an environment task force, which I would encourage even the other sub-counties and counties to formulate, where you coordinate. Anything that is environmental is coordinated within a team. And that team has the national government administrative officers, it has the KWS, the Kenya Forest Service, and those organizations that do anything, whatever they do, whether it is waste management or whether it is conservation, they are also included there. So if that is copy-pasted into all the other counties, it will be very important, because any activity that will be done within that region, it will be coordinated. Because you find that in the past, we could, for example, plant trees, and then those who have planted, they just leave. They have not coordinated with the local community so that they can take care, not graze their cattle them, not go and cut those trees, not go and maybe cut wood from that place, interfere with the water catchment area. But currently, we have the Kajiado North Environmental Task Force that comprises of all those bodies. And if such can be done, including even those areas like where my friend comes from in Madeira, it will help a lot to solve this problem of the climate change. And the other thing is that even the resources will be well distributed, because currently you just come, do your occasion, and then you leave. And then you never follow up what has been going on. So one of the things that we are trying to do as a task force is to make sure that, one thing, if it's an area you want to plant trees, it is fenced first. You fence it off. I remember I had a meeting yesterday with one of the task force members who happened to be a bank, and one of the things they are doing is to make sure that before even we start doing the tree planting, there is a well. A well is dug in advance, and then a team is created to make sure that whatever is done there is someone to protect it and take care of it. I think so far, with the initiative that the president did during his birthday last year, of which I participated and planted the 28th tree out of the 56 that he planted at Gong Hills, is a very important initiative that even other communities within our neighbors can also emulate and do. Climate is something practical.
And are you getting any support from the county government? Because most of what I see is more or less from international agencies and also from international players.
We are coordinating with them, but we are not getting enough. We are not getting enough, because like next month we are holding the World Water Day, and we will be celebrating in one of the springs. Last year, through our initiative, at least it is now protected. It is fenced off. Bamboo trees are planted there, but it is not enough. Let me challenge the government and even the county governments, not only in the regions where I am, in Nairobi area and the Kajiado area, but everywhere. Climate is not optional. We can do a lot of development, we can do the roads, we can do everything else, but not at the expense of our health. Because if we don't take care of the water resources that we have, there will be consequences. We do not have enough and clean water, and there will be waterborne diseases. So I would urge all the ministries and the counties to come together. If the water is not clean, it will not only affect the Ministry of Health, it will affect the Ministry of Agriculture. Because the crops that will be grown with that water, when it is contaminated, they will not be clean. It will affect even the Ministry of Treasury, because they not get enough resources from the people, not get enough tax from the people. But when we make sure that all these ministries are coordinated, if it is a county, it coordinates all the programs on conservation and environment together, then we'll move a mile ahead within a very short time. So I think it is the high time that, because we have seen what the areas that we not do collecting in the past, it is now time we do the collection and do the right thing now for the future of our children. Whatever climate that we are experiencing now, the good things we're experiencing now, it is because our forefathers did something. And not only in my region, all over the world, we need to do something so that the future generation can get something, can get some pride of what we did. It is not fair that we find now those things that were done even before the independence. Some of them are the ones that now we are benefiting from. The dams that were created those years are the ones that we are benefiting from. What is stopping us from creating new ones? And the funds are coming every year, every season, and we never take advantage of that. It is the high time now we correct our mistakes and encourage the future generation, those are the children, to make sure that they take care of the environment, they plant trees, and they know that they are not doing a favor to the environment. No, it is not. It is the environment that is actually their life. If they don't take care of the environment will really harsh on them. And that's why you see the drought that is currently there, because we have done something wrong to the environment. So it's a high time we correct our mistakes and do the best we can.
Of course, and to pick it from where the good Professor Wangari Maathai talked about is that if we take care of the environment and nature will take care of us. But unfortunately, we are giving nature the short end of the stick. Dr. I would like to ask, because of the interest of time, to touch on what counties, the capacity building in counties, and especially when it comes to drought responses. A number of counties have always wanted the government, oh, please kindly do this, do this, do this. And when we look at the ASO regions, we'll see a huge presence of Western entities or organizations and agencies, even big ones like UN and FAO, UNDP. They are all there just to try and help the situation as it is. But counties themselves, this is where I believe the rubber meets the road in terms of climate change mitigation and also environmental conservation, just as Francis has talked about.
First and foremost, climate change is real, and we must bear its consequences. And once we know that, then counties have played their roles they will play their role depending on how they get resources. You know, counties is the government. Basically, they rely on the national government to give them resources. If their allocation, particularly for that particular financial year, is prioritized, definitely the recurrent cannot be prioritized, because the current will continue running the system. But development resources are prioritized and ensure that if their priority was earlier on to construct some projects that will have no much immediate effect on the current situation, they should re-strategize. And I tend to think most of their response will just be guided by how the national government allocate resources to them. Having said that, they have also a basic role on the ground in terms of coordinating resources that comes into the county, particularly from well-wishers and international community, who have become very handy in ASAL regions. Northern regions have developed dependence on international aids. And I think doing small bits will not going to help much and make any significant change in the livelihood of the people in the northern region. The one thing that I would like to say is that if we consolidate resources within the county, and it's coordinated very well by the county government in every county of ASAL region, around 14, 15, 16 counties, then I think they will be able to prioritize interventions that will make meaningful results depending on the situation on the ground. And then, of course, there are some priorities you can't change. If they are supporting the health system, if they are supporting nutritional, interventions, those ones have to be there because those are the outcome of the effect of the major, the larger drought situation. And therefore, I tend to think the counties must play more robust role in ensuring that they coordinate very well, consolidate resources, and do prioritize interventions that can make differences. The other thing that I want us to include into that aspect of the county is the national government, particularly the leadership. I think people have a lot of ego in doing everything they want. Everyone will want to have a control of the resources that comes from the taxpayers. I think the best thing is that let's know that these resources that are entrusted with specific offices are meant for the taxpayers themselves in providing services for them. And I think involving the community in prioritizing on issues that is of priority to them will be of much help than just coming up with a project, which commonly people do. You just come with a project and start, pushing that project to the community, and then they have no otherwise because they are often told that this already has been approved, there is nothing else we can do, so the community have to accept it.
All right.
That way subjecting them to what actually is not their priority in terms of their needs.
And since we have around 2 minutes now, and there's something I wanted you to touch on, and especially because you're a doctor, that the cases of malnourished children and lactating mothers is a very serious issue, which I don't think we are taking the real gist of the matter, because we have, as a reporter, we have footages that we have from the ground that we can't even show the Kenyans because they're quite disturbing. I would like you to touch on that as we wind up.
Yeah, definitely starvation comes with malnutrition. So children are the first culprits of malnutrition, and lactating mothers. When you hear of lactating, because they are already feeding these children with their breast milk, and they are not feeding, they also subjected to the same thing. So nutrition has become a big issue. And one of the things that needs to be introduced at the moment is, first and foremost, is if it is severe malnourished children, they need to take them to stabilization centers. If there are people who needs to be given supplementary feeding programs to make sure that they don't also subject them, or they don't progress to severe malnutrition, that needs to be also done. And of course, food must be also provided to the family households, so that at the onset of malnutrition, start of a malnutrition is starvation at the household level. So food has to be contributed as well there. But there's one thing that I want to mention that people don't talk about it so much in the effect of this climate change. In these seconds you have given me, is climate change has come with massive mental health disorders. And we have a big challenge at the moment in addressing issues of mental health. These are because of external factors that are, the drought itself, the heat, the lack of food and resources. People get stressed, and quite a number of cases of mental health have now started coming out, and it is also as good as cases that needs to be addressed addressed in concurrently with malnutrition.
I think this is a discussion that we need also to remember, because mental wellness and also the aged who are suffering the worst brand. But gentlemen, thank you so much indeed for your insight and for your time.
Yes.
And we have been having Francis Kamau, who is an environmentalist and also the Secretary for Ngong Hills Mbagathi Water Resource User Association, and Dr. Isaac Harun Hassan, who is a public policy analyst, a governance expert, a medical doctor, all rolled into one. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and thank you so much for watching. Let's continue this conversation on our social media spaces. And also remember, now I'm giving the baton to the Swahili desk, Kurunzi Mashinani and Tamrini. Do have yourself a blessed afternoon. My name is Bentro Njue. We had Sudan Thuku earlier on as a sign language interpreter. Now we have Lensa Odingo. You can check her out. She is on the bottom right of your screen and also on social media. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Charlene, does your father know what you're doing? Does your date know the truth? And Jenny, does she know?
Jenny!
Stop calling me that.
Why can't I call you by your name?
Because I'm not Jenny. Can you pretend that we don't know each other?
What did you say? I didn't hear you.
At my workplace, there's a girl like you. Oh, actually, she is like you when you were young. So much about her makes me confused.
Why don't you tell him what I came here for? Tell him!
Stop it, that's enough.
Go ahead! Why don't you tell him? Ask her what happened,
I'm
Dad!
not interested. This whole thing's over.
Just get out of my house. I don't want to see you, simple as that. And it's better if we forget about what happened between us.
What's going on between you and Amparo?
Yes, I accept.
What? Yes to marrying me?
Yes. Alonso, why? Why did you do this to me? I loved you. Why did this have to happen to me?
So you have a girl now, young man? Is she someone I know?
Hello,